was great. That was synchronized swimming at its best. You know, you think about the Napa Valley, and I think that we think it's a lot bigger than it is. Of California's wine, it's like 5% comes from the Napa Valley. It is a small valley. It's bordered on two sides by mountain ranges, the Vaca to the east and the Mayacamas to the west. It's got Carneros in the southern end and Calistoga in the north. There's about 30 miles between those 2 points, but only about 3 miles between the two mountain ranges. But like so many tucked away corners of the earth that find 1,000 different ways, variables that came together to make great wine, Napa Valley's no different. Cabernet Sauvignon kind of became king in this valley. We think of it because of the Paris tasting in 1976, but that's just what validated Cabernet Sauvignon's role here. It had started to stake out its viticultural higher ground in the 30s and 40s with guys like John Daniel, Lee Stewart, and Andrei Chelychev. And there's a style and a patois to those wines that really kind of gave this region its own calling card. And then in the 90s, Robert Parker, a major wine critic, started to give 100-point scores to a pretty good number of wines that benefited from the heat spikes in 94 and what they were tasting out of barrel in 97. So you started to see this kind of quick run or almost sprint towards making wines with a bit more extraction, sweetness, alcohol, power, body, weight. Listen, go back to Claire Copey's Zinfandel tasting before this. Go down, scroll down, not yet, because listen, I didn't wear this scarf so you could cut me off 1 minute in. Scroll down after I'm done and go ahead and check it out. And she references it with Zinfandel, right? And it's not wrong. It's that same moment. It's that same moment when a zeitgeist hit. And it's easy to pin this on Parker, and that's not what it was. That was an influence, and so was the introduction of irrigation in 1971 and its proliferation in the 80s and the replant post-phylloxera. There was hundreds of things that came together, but what it did, undeniably, is it gave us a bifurcation point between kind of approaches to Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. And the question we're gonna kind of open up to and address a little bit today is, what are those styles? What is the kind of Parker 100-point version, and what is the opposite version? So we've got two wines with us today. And the first wine I wanna talk about is the one in the slightly bigger bottle. I guess as I look at them here, you can kind of tell probably right off the bat which one is which. This is Pulido-Walker. Pulido-Walker, this is their St. Helena Melanson Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon from 2018. This is made by Thomas Rivers Brown. He's one of the great and big names in this kind of more modern version of Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. Certainly there are outliers and there are always exceptions. I'm not trying to speak too blanketly here, but to be honest, we all know if you get a TRB on the label, and here they got them up front, you're gonna know that what you're in for is probably a little bit more of that more extracted, big, powerful style. The second wine we've got is definitely the unicorn of the Napa Valley in the last few years. This is Beta by Caton Modi. Caton Modi is like he's gonna kill me for saying this because it's been overwrought, but he's like a modern day Thoreau. The guy went into the woods, he bought a piece of land, cut down the trees and cleared the land and built a log cabin with his own hands that he lives in, and is making wines in a way that's a throwback to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. There's a version of a Napa Cab that's a bit more of a throwback, but this is a newcomer doing the throwback style. This is a DeLorean in a flux capacitor, and we're going back to 1955. And I think that that's what's exciting, is that Napa Valley's back like it was in 1997 in a bit of a flex point here, an opportunity to pivot, and you can make wines of different styles. So we're gonna cover Pulido-Walker, TRB, that's Thomas Rivers Brown to you and me, and we're gonna talk about his style of this Cabernet, the more modern 100-point version, and then we're gonna talk about what Caton's doing, in this case, in Oak Knoll. So let's just dive right in. We're gonna start here kind of with the obvious one. We're gonna start with the 2014 Beta. This is the Vare Vineyard. This is out of Oak Knoll. And you know, really what's exciting about what he's doing is the fact that he's staked his claim on an approach and a style of wine. The wine is It's not about asceticism, right? This isn't about being just cerebral for the sake of being cerebral and let's strip out the joy and the fun. That's not it at all. It's about saying, hey, man, there's a style of grape growing and winemaking that can maybe bring a little bit of highlight the heterogeneous nature of the AVAs of the valley. Warren Winiarski used to tell me that AVAs should be drawn with an etched clarity. That's what this kind of more throwback, old school style of wine approach does for the multiple terroirs of the Napa Valley. And we've got them here. Don't let anyone say that this is a sameness valley. The delta between Calistoga and Carneros is vast. And that's what this approach is. So this is, everything Caton's doing is all about kind of dry farmed and old school approach in the vineyard. The vineyard he's planning as a estate up on Diamond Mountain is head-trained vines, right? So no trellising, no wires, hand-split wooden stakes that are pounded into the ground and a grapevine put next to it. Then he's taking it and combining it with, old school winemaking, natural native yeast on the ferments, not doing any cold soaks or extended macerations, and then putting it into mostly neutral barrels. So this is Oak Knoll, right? So these are both Napa Valley, and there's a bit of distance between these two, about 12 miles of distance between these two. Oak Knoll being southern Napa. Napa's kind of like an inverted Medoc where you've got like the colder bits in the south and the warmer bits in the north. And so Oak Knoll being closer to the town of Napa and Carneros, this is gonna have a little more influence of the fog, the great fog that rolls into the Napa Valley and then peels its way back as the sun comes out during the growing season. And right off the nose, you're gonna get a little bit of a hint of that, right? That kind of black olive, tapenade, kind of green tea quality. But it sits right on there. It sits right on there with the cassis and the currant and the bit of black fruitedness, right? Cabernet Sauvignon, to me, always shows a little bit of that kind of very cool black fruited quality to it. But none of it's raisined, right? And I think this is where in your head, you're already starting to go, man, is this maybe Old World? Is this maybe Bordeaux? Because then there's like the right amount. And listen, guys, I feel like I preach on this too much and I probably need to stop, but pyrazine is a big fucking category, right? That's a huge word. And pyrazine can include all the cool things like lavender and dill and rosemary and all the things that we like about a Sauvignon variety. The one thing that we often look at as a way to determine if a wine was picked, if a Sauvignon variety is picked too early, is something called, here we go, the big one, 2-isobutyl 3-methoxypyrazine. That's like a subset category. That's the one that's like jalapeno and green bell pepper. And a grapevine produces it, by the way, as an insecticide, as a way to keep aphids from drinking the sap during its growth phase. But post-growth phase, when it's ready to ripen its fruit and it's going through veraison and it's ready to come out of that, it recalls that. Like a defective Pinto, it brings it all back and says, no, you gotta go away. That shit cannot last because a bird doesn't wanna eat that. And when that's recalled, that's when the grapevine goes into this final push of phenolic development, flavor development, aromatic development. And so I think that's what is happening right here is, this is black fruit and cassis and currant, but with so much more going on aromatically that leans into the pretty, beautiful floral fruit complex and herb fruit complex of Cabernet Sauvignon. This is 2014. This was a cooler year. So it's really kind of in the middle of back then what we called the drought years. Boy, have we learned a new definition for that. But this was like a low water year. Savory, high-toned acidity. This is where Cabernet Sauvignon shows its Sauvignon parentage, right? This is a hybrid of Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. This is a wine that's got acidity but isn't acidic. That's a huge and important distinction between the idea of a savory, let's go back to the glass, like intriguing element, and something that feels like tang. For those of you that are not 46 years old, tang was a shitty orange drink we used to have to drink that apparently astronauts had and was supposed to make us healthy.
Tang for the wake-up flavor everybody likes and protective vitamin C everybody needs.
It was sugar, really, and acid, like a lot of fake acid. Savory, interesting. It's not gonna be mistaken for Merlot. It doesn't have that kind of generosity, but what it has though is a nervous tension in the kind of herb fruit complex. And from the wines I've had from the 40s and 50s, from guys like John Daniel and Lee Stewart, Andrei Telechev, this is what I saw, but it was always so much later, right? I was always having those wines way late. What I'm having here is a wine that, in my mind's eye, I can tell you feels like I'm gonna vote Gordy Wilson for mayor, all right? That's what I feel like we're looking at right now. Next up, let's have a little Pulido-Walker. This is, again, St. Helena. This is a vineyard that sits on a hillside kind of facing that kind of where Colgan's at. It's got a lot of extreme nature to it. This is a vineyard of extraordinary pedigree. Just coming out of the core in here, you can kind of start to see the first elements that we're gonna see the difference between the Pulido-Walker and the Beta. It's coming out with that darker color. It's got a little purple kind of hue to it. Even the bubbles that are splashing up are carrying that purple kind of quality. Having made wine for the last number of years alongside my wife, Sarah, this is the color that we always see on those first days of fermentation, you know, and that kind of first kind of early mature, kind of juvenile and adolescent quality. Okay, so here's like the big delta between these two, the big difference. Like, what's the first thing you smell? This one, the Pulido-Walker was aged in about 80% new French oak, and you get it right away. Like, we can almost call out Terenceau and Hermitage. Like, we can almost name the Cooper. This has got that scent of vanilla and baking chocolate and cocoa. You can feel already that there's a little more density and weight, a little more power to this wine. So here, it's the same kind of thing. Like, you're gonna get black fruit, you're gonna get cassis and currant in the Pulido-Walker, just like we did in the Beta, but everything goes from being kind of like picked on the first days of the window of ripeness to picked on the last days of the window of ripeness. A little sweetness to the fruit, almost like you're making a jam and you've taken that black currant and that raspberry and a little bit of like a black cherry compote kind of quality, but all touched with a little bit of creme brulee-esque character to it. And then there's that signature, and I'm sorry to do this, but that Napa Cab quality, right? There's a creaminess, a softness, a giving, a plush, a round, a texture, generosity. I do the air quotes, and I fucking hate I'm sorry for that, but it's because, like, this is what, since 1997, really, we've been trained to believe is the element that we're talking about in Napa Cab. Because this is equally true and equally sincere, genuine, honest Napa Cab. It doesn't have that, and that's a choice, right? That's intent. So much of it has to do with intent. Doesn't mean right or wrong, it just means intent. What was your purpose? Why did you do it? And here, I can see why these guys, rightfully, are so thrilled with this Pulido-Walker and why Jeb Dunnett gives it 100 points and why Venice gives it 99 points, because there is a Spinal Tap, let's go to 11 kind of vibe to the Pulido-Walker, right? You know? And, you know, listen, without saying like, well, sure, couldn't you just make the 10th the highest number in the thing? Let's not get into the Spinal Tap elements, but you get what I'm saying. It's cranked up a little bit higher and a little bit heavier. Similar kind of fruited elements, but you can see a connective tissue between them. Just a really big difference in intent and purpose. There's tons of joy to be had in both, and I want to make sure that I really state that clearly, because I'm not here to hate on anybody or anything, and certainly who the fuck am I to hate on anything? These guys have done well and made more money and had more success than I'll ever sniff. But when I think about this valley and its history and its tradition, I'm just inspired, right? And I just love to see the fact that the Napa Valley is embracing this kind of broad spectrum of opportunity and this broad spectrum of flavor profile. And we're seeing that it's not just us pointing to the past and saying, hey, those wines were different back in the day, but the future and what's happening in the valley and inspiring a lot of us is happening right under our noses and in the smallest, most kind of tucked away corners of the valley. So look, you can't go wrong with either one. They're both beautiful. They're both delicious. You're gonna see if you can afford this one and if you can find that one, go ahead and repeat this tasting, because it's a really interesting and beautiful way to see the dynamic between what the Napa Valley's got going on.